Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the Fleischer Studios Superman cartoons from the early 1940s, from 1941 to 1942. This is continuing my series of reviews for Superman because Man of Steel comes out on Friday. The 1940s Superman series was originally started by the Fleischer brothers, Max and Dave Fleischer. Max Fleischer was the producer and Dave Fleischer was the director. They made about 9 Superman shorts while they were in control of Fleischer Studios that eventually Fleischer was kind of Paramount's animation provider, eventually became Famous Studios, and then they made 8 more, but I'm only focusing on the original 9. I'm going to do another review about the other 8. And these shorts are some of the best animated shorts ever made. They're some of the first action cartoons ever. Most cartoons at this time were really, comedies. They were like funnier cartoons and like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and things like that. And the Fleischers were kind of second to Disney at the time. I think they were sometimes superior to Disney in a lot of their shorts with Popeye and Betty Boop and Out of the Inkwell. They're a very popular studio. And they had a deal with Paramount, and Paramount really wanted them to do a Superman series of films that would play before the movie. They'd have, back then when they'd have shorts play and cartoons play before the features, and cartoons were very popular, and they wanted them to do a Superman series, and Max and Dave Fleischer did not want to do a Superman series. They thought it was going to be a nightmare to do, and they didn't really want to do it. They asked Paramount for a ridiculous amount of money, and Paramount gave them half that, but said they would pay for $50,000 for the first cartoon, which was a huge budget, and each of the subsequent ones cost about $30,000, and most cartoons at this time did not cost that much at all. The whole series of Superman films cost something like $7 million, which was an astronomical amount. So these are really high budget, really high quality because of that, and the animation is really good because they had all this money to spend on it, and so they made these Superman films because they're like, okay, well, I guess you're gonna give us the money and the budget for it. And this was Fleischer Studios at their peak. They had evolved from the silent cartoons to Betty Boop to Popeye, and then they're making these Superman cartoons, which are still, I think, probably the finest example of what Fleischer could really do. There's a lot of fun sci-fi gags in this, and one thing I like about this kind of storytelling, it's kind of the quest or the adventure over something like character development. There's no character development in these films at all. Superman doesn't really change at all. He's Superman, he saves Lois Lane, that's it. I think it's more about the adventure than the character, and I kind of like stories like that. I like films like that. There's a bit of fun in that, and when it's done well. There's 9 overall. There's Superman, or The Mad Scientist, which was kind of the pilot film, The Mechanical Monsters, $1 Billion Limited, The Arctic Giant, The Bulleteers, The Magnetic Telescope, Electric Earthquake, Volcano, and Terror on the Midway. The 2 most famous of these are definitely the first film, which most people call Superman, some people will call The Mad Scientist, and Mechanical Monsters. Now, the first film was nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film. It did not win, unfortunately. Disney won for a Pluto film. The highest budget any of them have was the first pilot film, which is really beautiful and amazing, and I love the animation in that. The Mad Scientist has like that little weird vulture character who is probably the closest during the Fleischer run of a real like kind of silly cartoony character. And Mechanical Monsters went on to influence a lot of people, including Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. The opening is very influenced by Mechanical Monsters. Also, Hayao Miyazaki was very influenced by it in one of his later Lupin the Third episodes. Those are kind of the 2 most well known, and they're probably the 2 best. I mean, they're just very incredibly well made and well animated. I like all of them for the most part. They're kind of like sci-fi fun adventures. There's no Superman villains. I mean, you don't see Lex Luthor in this. There's no Brainiac or anything like that. I don't know if those characters were introduced at the time. I mean, this is 41 and 42. The first one came out in September 41. The last one of the Fleischer run came out in August of 42. They don't have kind of regular villains. They're all these kind of inventions of the Fleischer studio, I believe. The studio just had some incredible animation coming out of it, and the draftsmanship and the color and the movement is just amazing. They actually invented rotoscope, and they use a lot of rotoscope in this film. One of the Fleischer brothers invented it, and they used that in this film. They didn't rotoscope people flying because, people can't fly, so they had to make that one up. But a lot of Superman's movements were rotoscoped, and it has a cool, sleek look about it. I always like the look of these films. One of my favorite things about Superman is these films, and it's probably my favorite big screen interpretation of Superman. It's so well made and so well done and has such a sleek look about it. I remember my grandfather, when we'd have Easter at his house or Thanksgiving or Christmas, he had this big kind of basket filled of tapes of cartoons. When VHS started You could just go to like a dollar store or something, I don't know where, and you just get these tapes, and they'd have tons of cartoons on them. They'd have Looney Tunes and Superman. They would never put the cartoons in the correct order, so you just have to watch the whole tape. And I'd love seeing some of these cartoons, and I remember a lot of them. I mean, the first two are so memorable. I know I saw those a couple times, and several of the other ones as well. Specifically like the Arctic Giant, I remember, and the Magnetic Telescope, I definitely remember. They were always such a treat to see, and even though I didn't know anything about animation at the time, I always knew they were a much bigger, more detailed production at the time. And I like the Fleischer brothers anyway. They're such a great studio. Mr. Bug Goes to Town is from this era as well. They were just starting to do features. They're kind of becoming a bigger and bigger animation studio. Unfortunately, they ended in the middle of this series, and they're such a great studio. It's always a shame. I mean, some people say Fleischer, you know, it could have easily happened to Disney as well. They could have gone out of business at a certain point. As unbelievable as that sounds today, to see where the Fleischers were in the early 40s, I always wish it could have gone on. They actually were the ones who came up with the idea that Superman should fly. Superman would jump. The saying at the beginning of all these shorts, it says able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. That was Superman. He could just jump really high. The Fleischers were like, this looks silly. That's how they described it. They thought it was kind of stupid, so they asked DC, can we have him fly? And they were like, all right, I guess you can have him fly. And so they're the ones who came up with Superman flying, one of the most important powers that Superman has. The Fleischer animation films would later influence the Batman the Animated Series in the 90s and the Superman the Animated Series show as well. And they took the Art Deco style of these and made it into, I think it's called like Dark Deco is what they called it. I think that's the one thing DC's always had over Marvel, is DC has some incredible classic pieces of animation of their characters with this and Batman the Animated Series. I mean, it doesn't matter. To me, those are like some of the best superhero cartoons ever made. There's not really much dialogue in them. They did have the voices of the radio serial in them, so people would recognize the voice of Superman as from the voice they heard from the radio. But it's interesting that there's not a lot of voices in it, you know, it's not a lot of talking. I mean, they have incredible music. The music is great. It's like some great 40s cartoon music, but it really makes the cartoons, it makes them exciting. Superman really needs a great score to it, because whether it's this or the Superman the movie, a great score really propels the story for this character. When you look at how they did it, it's really like a lot of action, you know, it's not a lot of talking, it's not a lot of conversing. It's really just a lot of action and movement and adventure, and that's what drives the story. It's fun to watch a story that's more about the adventure than the character. I think a lot of times we have a lot of bad stories that try to be about character when they really should just be about adventure. And I like the sci-fi element, whether it's an electronic earthquake or a magnetic telescope, or you know, mechanical robots that are run by, like, I think they're radio waves, or evil scientists with like creepy vultures and things like that. The later two shorts of Volcano and Terror on the Midway kind of get away from that, and I'm wondering if the Fleischers were kind of losing control and they just put their names on it or something, because it's not the kind of the same sci-fi fun that they presented in the original shorts. There's kind of like a fun sci-fi pulp element to it. I love how these are kind of done in the pulp cover style, and there's really no animation of this time period that personifies the pulp cover style the way these Superman shorts do, and really get the detail. They were like these painted covers that were just absolutely beautiful. I mean, this is just some of the best animation. It doesn't really matter if you're into Superman or adventure or anything. If you just love animation, you should absolutely see the Fleischer Superman cartoons. And I have to recommend that Warner Brothers is a cool studio because they don't actually own the rights to these. Nobody does. They're in the public domain, but Paramount actually produced them. And they bought the original negatives and restored all of this series of Superman cartoons, Fleischer and Famous Studios cartoons. If you want to watch them, they're restored versions. The recent restored versions are all online at Warner Brothers YouTube, and try to check those out because the restorations are just beautiful. Like, I had a DVD, I was all ready to watch it, and I looked it up and I found these and I was like, oh, I'll just watch these, forget it. The restoration they did is really beautiful. And I used to watch them on shitty VHS, so I guess I'd never seen some of the colors I saw from this, but I mean, I got a DVD that was kind of restored, but not. This is just the restoration. This is amazing, and it's great that Warner Brothers they have the original negatives, and that they will restore something like this, be restored and come back to life in its like full glory. So if you have seen the Fleischer Studios Superman cartoons and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. I'm going to do a review of the Famous Studios Superman cartoons. but I'm not sure if that's going to happen on Friday or next week. Unfortunately, Man of Steel does not have early shows. They're midnight shows. I don't think I can make it to that, so my Man of Steel review is probably going to come up Friday night, Saturday morning type of time, so maybe the Famous Studios Superman cartoons review will come out before then, but maybe after. But I am going to do one, and I will see you then, and thank you for watching.